Dim the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for stories that will haunt your dreams and send shivers down your spine. Here at Tombstone Tales, we delve into the darkest corners of the internet, unearthing chilling stories of the supernatural, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying. From shadowy figures lurking in the night to sinister secrets buried deep in forgotten history, each episode is crafted to immerse you in a world of fear and fascination. Hit that subscribe button, join our community of thrill seekers, and embark on a journey where every whisper could be a warning and every shadow a threat. Are you ready to face your fears? Then let the story time begin. Hi folks, before we start this story, a little background information for you. The Min Min lights are a phenomenon reported in Australia, particularly in the outback regions. They are mysterious lights that appear to hover just above the horizon, often described as floating, bobbing, or moving in an erratic manner. I hope you enjoy this next story by Rosalind Scott. They say that crossing the Nullabor Plain across Australia is an endless road of vast emptiness. For many that is the case, but it was not for me. My trip driving across the Nullabor was the most terrifying experience of my life and one which I never thought I was going to survive. Honestly, I am still surprised I am alive to tell this story. I had decided to drive across the country from Western Australia to Melbourne to visit family. I was in between work and intended on making the most of this trip, stopping along the way to do a bit of camping and fishing. It was meant to be the trip of a lifetime. I had originally planned to bring a mate along for the ride, but as life would have it, at the last minute he had to pull out. I packed up my old Ford and hit the road. The first part of my journey went well. I had driven most of the day and got to my first destination, which had a campsite on the coastline. I set up the annex on my car and got my fishing rod out and walked down to the beach to throw a line in. I had the beach to myself as no other campers had turned up, and that suited me fine. I spent the night catching a few fish and eventually went to sleep around midnight. The next morning I packed up and hit the road again. I had been driving for about 4 hours and the heat was setting in. The old car was starting to get hot, so it was a relief to get to the last truck stop. I eased into the petrol station and filled up the tank. It's a long way between fuel stations and not a good idea to run out of petrol, so I topped up my jerry can as well. Apart from a few cars parked in front of the cafe, there wasn't much sign of life. With the heat setting in, I imagine the few locals were probably staying indoors, not wanting to brave the 40-degree heat. I paid for my fuel and walked back over to my car. Across the car park stood a cop. His face was weather-beaten under his cowboy hat. I nodded my head to acknowledge him, but got no response back, so I got back in the car and drove slowly past his vehicle. I don't know why, but the vibes emanating from him towards me were not good. Probably something to do with his cold, hard stare. I drove on out, eager to hit the road and put some distance between me and that old cop. It was late afternoon and hot as Hades, so the tar on the road was melting under the blistering heat. My old car wasn't liking the heat, so I turned off onto a side road and slowly made my way to the coastline. There were plenty of camping spots along the way, but many were a good half-hour distance from the main road and very isolated. I didn't worry about much, because I was a sizable guy and knew how to handle myself. I also had plenty of camping experience. I got to the campground, took a look around, and decided to park behind a sand dune as the wind was picking up off the coast, and I didn't fancy chasing down camping equipment. It got to around 9 p.m. and the wind had died down, so I picked up my rod and walked down to the beach to get in a bit of fishing. The sound of the gentle waves was hypnotic, and the feel of the cool water on my feet made me feel sleepy. I opened my camp chair up and sat down, getting my rod positioned into the sand. I'd been there for about an hour when I began to notice a fog coming in off the ocean. I don't know why, but it creeped me out, so I packed it in and walked back to my campsite. While I was putting my gear away, I noticed the light coming in off the ocean. It was not the moon, so I assumed maybe a passing ship or an aircraft of some kind. The light started coming closer and seemed to radiate a strange energy that felt spooky. I told myself to stop being stupid and put it down to having an overactive imagination. As it came closer, it grew larger and began to pulsate more and more. It was something I had never seen before and something I wasn't sure I wanted to experience, so I packed up my car and decided to drive back to the main road. I had hoped the light would not travel any further inland towards me, but that wasn't to be. It seemed to be following my car, and it was now obvious to me that I was experiencing something not normal. The track was pretty rough, and I felt every bump as I pushed my old car over the rough terrain. I was trying to watch out for kangaroos, as they also could appear out of nowhere and do a lot of damage to a car. Suddenly, the back wheels of the car lost traction, and I felt the car lift off the ground. "What the hell?" I yelled out while I looked into the rear view mirror. Somehow the pulsating light had sent some kind of charge out and had a hold of the vehicle. I revved the engine and put my foot down on the pedal. The car bumped back onto the ground and bounced. "Shit!" I yelled again while fighting for control at the wheel. I took off like a bat out of hell, while the pulsating light kept pace with my car. It did not seem to matter how fast I went. The light stayed above the car and kept sending out charges, which were now causing my car to strain. I tried to keep an eye on where it was positioned and drive as fast as I could without crashing. I hoped like hell that nothing jumped out in front of me, because I wasn't going to stop for anyone or anything until I was well clear of this thing, whatever it is. Finally, my high-beam headlights shone up the stop sign on the edge of the highway, but I was not going to slow down. The tires slid and squealed as I swung onto the road, and I slammed my foot flat to the floor on the accelerator. The old car's engine roared, straining against the force that was holding the back wheels again up into the air. "Damn it! Damn it!" I shouted at the pulsating light as it once again dropped the car back down onto the road. Again, I gunned it as the car strained against the invisible pull. Finally breaking free and away, I went speeding down the highway at full speed. It didn't seem to matter how fast the car went. The pulsating light continued to stay with the car, lighting the whole inside of the car up. Fear by this time had well and truly gripped me, and I had broken out into a cold sweat. My hands had got clammy, and it was a struggle to keep a good grip on the steering wheel when I braced for the lifting sensation. This time, all four wheels came off the ground in the grip of this unseen force. I yelled, begging whatever it was to let go, and down the car crashed back onto the surface of the road. Suddenly, lights started to come in the distance from the opposite direction, so I flashed my headlights, hoping to get the attention of whoever it was. The pulsating light above me suddenly swept to the front of the car and headed towards the oncoming headlights. I felt a rush of relief and also a rush of fear for whoever it was that was coming in the opposite direction. By this time, the pulsating light was between my car and the other car. I was torn between still driving like a bat out of hell or slowing down to warn the other driver. As we drew closer, I saw the other vehicle had stopped as the headlights had stopped moving. The pulsating light by this time seemed to be directly over the opposite vehicle. I slowed the vehicle right down when I realized the other vehicle was the cop car I had seen at the truck station. Standing beside the car door stood that weather-beaten old copper with his double-barrel shotgun. As I approached, he waved me to keep going while he looked up at the pulsating light. I passed slowly by looking back in my rear vision mirror only to see the cop raising his shotgun in my direction. "Shit!" I yelled when I heard the blast of the gun going off, expecting bullets to come through the car. "That bastard is mad," I yelled out as I put my foot down on the pedal again. As I sped away, I watched the old cop lift his gun up again and realized he wasn't shooting at me, but was firing at the huge ball of light that shot out beams of light back at the cop. I admit, I was too scared to slow down or stop, so I drove through the rest of the night until I got to the next truck stop. It was a huge relief to see people, cars, and to be back in civilization. I walked into the diner and sat down at the nearest table. My hands were still shaking as I relived the horrifying night. The waitress walked up to me and said, "You look pale, like you've seen a ghost." I looked up and said, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." The waitress stood for a moment peering at my face and said, "Actually, I would. Strange things are known to happen out on the Nullabor Plains." She then turned and walked away. If you're driving across the Nullabor Plains, beware of the Min Min lights. If you don't believe me, Go try your luck and see for yourself. Like I said, I am not one to easily believe in myths and legends, but what I experienced firsthand, I wouldn't wish on my enemy.